I've recently posted new articles to my website, mackerelphones.com, and to my Medium page about the strange Diva Story 6 Imperial of Nursartia, and another one about the way-forward Game Boy Advance title Sigma Star Saga. You can also read plenty of other interesting material there. Just saying. Anyway, now for the feature presentation. I guess. Konami developed the original Snatcher and published it in 1988 on the PC 88 and MSX2. Konami, or rather Scott T. Hards, translated, and Sega published, the first ever English language release on Sega CD in 1994. It's far superior to the broken English of the abandoned MSX2 translation by Takamichi Suzukawa and Artemio Urbina, released in 2002. It's also the version I am reviewing here. Legendary for its early place in the career of its creator and writer, Hideo Kojima, Snatcher retains acclaim as, so Wikipedia alleges, one of the best adventure games and cyberpunk video games of all time. Note, by the way, that Kojima is not credited as the director. That is Sasaki Yoshinori. The localization team based the English-exclusive Sega CD Snatcher on the 1992 PC Engine release, Snatcher CD Romantic. Do you get it? Which Kojima and team expanded to include a third act that resolves the story. Yes, due to time and memory limitations, the original is incomplete. Graphically, the Sega CD Snatcher is almost identical to CD Romantic. However, the Sega CD version includes some English-exclusive content, such as an optional comedy scene involving a phone sex hotline. Its expanded ending also includes more characters to provide superior closure. In addition, the Sega CD localization alters various pop-cultural references, such as changing the cosplay at Outer Heaven from movie parodies to Konami characters. The Snatchers have also been redesigned, perhaps to avoid resembling Terminators closely enough to incur the wrath of James Cameron. The story opens with the narrator explaining the catastrophe. In 1996, the bioweapon Lucifer Alpha leaks from a lab in Moscow, following an unexplained explosion, spreading throughout Asia and Eastern Europe to rapidly wipe out most of the world's population.
50 years later, mankind faces its greatest crisis. The appearance of a mysterious android life form. Its purpose and origin are unknown. Is it a new form of weapon? Or perhaps an invasion from some other world? They appear during winter, killing humans and infiltrating society by taking the place of their victims. Employing an artificial skin, they can sweat and even bleed. Part organic, part machine, they're almost impossible to distinguish from those they kill. As they steal their victims' bodies in order to take their place, these mysterious invaders become known as Snatchers.
An expeditionary force into the Siberian neutral zone finds Gillian and Jamie Seed, two amnesiac individuals who can only remember the word Snatcher. The Seeds move to Neo-Kobe, an artificial island of Japan that has become a culturally diverse immigrant's paradise. Gillian and Jamie informally divorce. 3 years later, near Christmas, Gillian hopes to regain his memories no matter how terrible the truth might be, in part so that he might remember his relationship with Jamie to get back together with her. So he joins the special police force, Junker, to hunt down the Snatchers invading Neo-Kobe. This long chain of seemingly disconnected events is just the setup, but the writing and performances deliver this material with conviction and urgency, and the plot manages to resolve every tangled thread.
It's unbelievably light.
You bet it is. This ain't one of those ray guns the Army uses.
Snatcher's 3 acts take about 7 hours to clear total, though longer if you wanted to see everything, I'm sure. The opening hours suggest a dark, intense thriller, but the initial horror, suspense, and graphic violence give way to a wacky buddy cop story featuring the daring goofball Gillian Seed and his fussy robot companion, Metal Gear. Sunscreen and sneezing are hugely important to the plot. There's a woman with a cat genetically modified to double as a handbag. A badass bounty hunter named Random Hajiel rides a motor unicycle. The cast of characters all prove likable and interesting. The issue, if there is one, is that the story could use more of the long-suffering junker mechanic Harry, given his important role in the story especially, more of the eccentric Napoleon hopping between odd jobs. Snatcher, by the way, is canon to the original Metal Gear, but is not canon to Metal Gear Solid. The timeline diverges after Metal Gear, so that one series of events leads to Snatcher, and the other to Metal Gear Solid. Snatcher features genuinely well-intentioned governance, global nuclear disarmament, a World War III resolved peacefully in a mere 6 months via Western sanctions, and a Japan that totally rejects xenophobia. This allegedly bleak future seems downright utopian. The pixel art graphics, credited to Kushibuchi Satoshi and crew, depict even the bad parts of Neo Kobe as warm and inviting. The gleaming metropolis with its flying cars, neon glow, and bright, goofy Christmas-time advertisements, evoking none of the despotism and decay of Blade Runner's rainy, post-apocalyptic Los Angeles dictatorship. Neo Kobe is under massive surveillance by Alpha 1, the state AI, and suffers severe class inequalities. However, the story almost entirely ignores these subjects to depict the city as a lively, delightful, diverse place worth saving, not, despite its familiar flaws, a hell to escape. The brutality of the Snatchers is all the more appalling for its contrast to the colorful characters and friendly world. Whereas Blade Runner lavishes as much sympathy on the replicants as on Deckard, if not more, Snatcher portrays the bioroids as an absolute evil. This darker narrative decision eliminates moral grays, resulting ironically in a breezier story. Snatchers do not merely shoot their victims, but twist their heads off and tear their intestines out. They murder animals as well as humans in an invasion rather than out of desperation, and the big shot Snatcher Chin Shuo directly states that the Snatchers admire the Nazis.
In the same way as the Nazis, our strategy begins with the overpowering of the spirit of the people.
The plot and aesthetic unsubtly copy Blade Runner, the Snatcher bioroids closely resemble Terminators, and the premise and title emulate Invasion of the Body Snatchers down to vaguely anti-communist paranoia.
We only require her cooperation for a short period here at the Kremlin.
Some dismiss Snatcher as a hacky Blade Runner copycat, but Kojima, Sasaki, and the other creators take the concept of a cop hunting for fake humans in a sufficiently different direction narratively and tonally than any of their inspirations that the result achieves its own identity. In terms of design, Snatcher is a Japanese adventure game through and through. Even more than some of its contemporary video games, Snatcher apes the design of the genre's 1983 progenitor, Portopia Renzoku Satsujin Jiken. Via menu options presented alongside graphics in a box on a blank background, the player controls from a first-person perspective a policeman who commands an assistant to interact with characters and the environment to solve a murder case. Snatcher even retains the semi-open world freedom to travel between different parts of the city and gathering phone numbers. Also following standard design is flag hunting, which unfortunately defines Japanese adventure games, at least in the 80s and 90s. Rather than, say, finding a clue and then acting on it, the player finds the clue, but then must locate some arbitrary hidden flag. This amounts to selecting every possible option from the menu repeatedly to eventually trigger the flag and end the filler. Frequently, for example, Gillian will not enter any building until the player looks around outside enough, even when doing so is no longer advancing the plot or introducing new information, but rather characterizing Gillian as either woefully unprofessional, or very hesitant, or perhaps having severe and untreated ADHD. I would know. The scene in the pet hospital is a hilarious joke, but we don't need to be here this long. Why are we dragging out the scene? Metal Gear, let's go! The only formal innovation is the addition of shooting gallery segments, when Gillian must be quick on the draw to fight off the Snatchers and their robotic minions, the Insectors. The player must gun down enemies before their blasts empty Gillian's health bar. In a rare attention to detail that may reflect a get-good ethos, the dialogue always acknowledges how often Gillian has been hit, and the nanomachines that treat his wounds. Despite the initial trivial difficulty of the shooting gallery segments, the possibility of a game over if the player is slow on the draw ingeniously introduces a degree of tension rare for a menu-based adventure game. However, the final two Insector battles represent such enormous difficulty spikes over anything else, including the Snatcher battles, that they are instead infuriating. The Insectors are deadlier than any Snatcher.
Doesn't look like there's anything here.
Ah!
Oh, phew! They're not Insectors. Not helping is that frequently, Gillian refuses to shoot even when I hit the button, throwing off my rhythm and all but guaranteeing a game over. I encountered this phenomenon on multiple gamepads, so the flaw lies not in hardware. The shooting segments also alienate the probably substantial portion of the adventure game market not up for mandatory tests of arcade skill. Action scenes notwithstanding, what elevates Snatcher above other similar adventure games is the quality of its presentation, so full of color and humor, and the high production values with which this release wows. Konami takes advantage of the CD space with the standout opening jazz track One Night in Neo Kobe City, and extensive, consistent voice acting. While most of Snatcher's script takes the form of on-screen text to read, many especially important and cinematic scenes, of which there are many, feature full vocal performances. Normally, voice acting in a 1994 CD game inspires dread.
You know what they say, all toasters toast toast.
I'm hitting the thigh. Ow, oh, damn.
However, for the most part, the cast assembled for the Sega CD Snatcher deliver excellent performances, most especially by the standards of 1994 video games.
Mika, come on, snap out of it. It's me, Gillian.
Gillian? Gillian.
Mika, what happened?
Gillian, the chief.
Interestingly, line delivery is more awkward in the beginning, making for a worse first impression than what Snatcher offers overall. Most of the characters' English voices resemble their Japanese counterparts, at least they do enough. The starkest contrast is reserved for the star. In Kojima's own version, Yusaku Yara portrays Gillian Seed with a deep, highly masculine voice more typical for the star of a violent thriller.
ギリアンシードです。第17特殊部隊から来ました。
In contrast, Jeff Lupetin's Gillian, while serious when necessary, often comes off as an over-enthusiastic and even childish dork.
I want my pizza!
Lupetin's nasally Gillian endears because he falls outside of what one expects from his role.
A light just came on. There's not supposed to be anybody in there.
Lupetin's voice also suits the baby-faced Gillian Seed better than Yusaku's hypermasculine one. Even so, stark differences like these may compromise the artist's vision somewhat. If the creators mean Snatcher to be less memorable in this regard, then the English version should be as well. While the first two acts are brisk, exciting, and mysterious, the rushed ending of Snatcher infects the whole story with weirdness in pacing and thematic incoherency. These shortcomings likely reflect that the creators didn't succeed in completing the full video game they envisioned and had to backload all their plans into a third act shorter than the first two. However, I am here not to evaluate what could have been, but what is. The big bad, Elijah Modnar, comes almost out of nowhere for a 20-minute climactic cutscene. Prior to this point, the only reference to him, so far as I know, is in a single line from Chin Shuo. Why do the writers assume the player is invested in this random old man's relationship with Jamie and Gillian and multi-generational family drama? The family drama might appeal to fans of backstory, given that Modnar is the son of Petrovich Madnar from Metal Gear. I don't know why the localization changes his name from Elijah Madnar to Elijah Modnar. But isn't the story supposed to be about Gillian? This is the climax. This is when Gillian needs to confront his past. In the opening, Jamie warns Gillian,
"But I can sense that there is something terrible hidden in our past, and if we remember it, it will destroy us."
But Act 3's revelations about this past do not complicate Gillian's character. For a moment, the story suggests Gillian might be responsible for the catastrophe. Oh no! Could Gillian be the greatest monster who ever lived? Could Gillian have murdered 4 billion people? This revelation could destroy him. It raises interesting conflicts and questions. Is Gillian meaningfully the same person he was when he did this before his mind was wiped? Will regaining his memories to rekindle his relationship with Jamie also mean embracing guilt and responsibility by becoming the man he once was? But almost instantly, the script shoots down this drama because Elijah, the already irredeemably evil cyborg monster, caused the catastrophe. Don't worry, Gillian. Yes, you participated in the Snatcher project, but you did so blamelessly as a heroic CIA agent there to thwart Elijah. No guilt, no drama. Well, if he was CIA, Gillian was evil, but Kojima doesn't think so. Gillian is a failure of a protagonist, not in the sense that he is unlikable or does not succeed in the plot, but in that the drama is not about him. It is about Elijah and random Hajil. While he has a touching scene with Harry, Gillian goes through little lasting drama afterward, this tragedy serving only as a final driver of his hatred of the Snatcher menace. Gillian has no arc. Meanwhile, Random not only has deep connections to our villain Elijah and his own mysterious past about which he knows nothing, he does have a full character arc. While I applaud that the writers avoided the obvious Blade Runner twist of Gillian and Jamie being Snatchers, Random does come to a shocking identity-shattering revelation about his identity. Compared to Gillian's weak tea, Random should have been the protagonist of Snatcher. In a charming touch, the Sega CD Snatcher lets the player call members of the localization staff. Hayasaka Taeko, a Konami PR person, tells the player, "I'm sure everyone has seen a movie, read a book, or heard music that stays with you and that you never forget. Snatcher is that type of work. I hope it is for you too." What prevents Snatcher from achieving the greatness of a movie, book, or piece of music that stays with you is that thematically, Snatcher is not about much. The intention seems to be that it's a story about how paranoia drives people apart. In the finale, Elijah claims that his Snatcher project is to expose the flaws of the human character.
No matter how much science advances or how high we set our ideals, we eventually begin to suspect each other, to hate each other, and then to kill each other. The Snatchers are nothing more than a tool for bringing out this reaction. I am simply using the Snatchers to elicit the true nature of the human animal. I think this experiment has shown me the limits of human society.
Snatcher famously opens with a dedication to cyberpunks, although its main characters are cops, not punks. Less famous is the ending text.
Throughout history, suspicion has always bred conflict. The real conflict, though, resides in people's hearts. This conflict has just begun.
The story of Snatcher fails to grapple with these ideas about suspicion and division and conflict in our hearts. Gillian, and hence the player, never observe paranoia leading to hatred or driving people apart. Nobody rejects Gillian out of suspicion he is a Snatcher, say. The only time Gillian enters this dark place is when he terrorizes Ivan Rodriguez, though the script assumes this is morally acceptable after all because Rodriguez, how scandalous, does drugs. When he discovers that a Snatcher has been spying on him, the story lets the player and Gillian become suspicious of the Snatcher's identity. However, the story drops the possibility of a paranoid thriller. There's no moment in which Gillian has to directly decide if he can prove who the Snatcher is, for example, or starts avoiding a friend out of distrust. The first act is just a murder mystery where the murderers happen to be Snatchers. The second act involves revealing the Snatchers' plot to turn people against each other, rather than depicting Snatchers turning people against each other. In the third act, out of distrust of Neo Kobe, there are plans to nuke the island and summarily kill everyone there to stop the Snatchers.
There are rumors that they're going to use nukes on the city to make sure the Snatchers are wiped out.
That's ridiculous. Come on, this is the 21st century.
That may not be as improbable as it seems.
While the shocking development of the whole city being othered and attacked out of suspicion would serve the theme, this plot point happens entirely off-screen. The nuclear option is only a ticking clock to ratchet up the suspense. The story never explores this material. In addition to Elijah pretending his experiment has shown him the limits of human society, Jordan's databanks contain accounts of the STD STBO, paranoia over which is likened to the AIDS epidemic of the 1980s and said to drive families apart, and the witch hunts, in which Neo-Kobe's wealthier classes lynched poor people under the false suspicion that they were snatchers. The witch hunts sound like an enthralling and unsubtle, purge-like commentary on class conflict. Jordan even logs that the phenomenon underscored the north-south rift of modern society. But this material is only available to read. No character, so far as I know, even mentions the witch hunts or STBO to Gillian. The creators of Snatcher commit the amateur writing mistake of assuming that characters talking about a subject means that the story is about that subject. Despite these narrative weaknesses, the third act also enriches the overall story relative to the incomplete 1988 Snatcher. By tying the genesis of the Snatchers to the catastrophe and to Gillian and Jamie, the writers wrap up the action while also creating a more intimate story, a story with a solid emotional heart. The 1988 script, in comparison, is shallow, not least because Gillian doesn't seem to really care about or respect Jamie. The Sega CD Snatcher introduces some censorship. A certain Snatcher's breasts are no longer bared upon her head being exploded, for example, and the plot involves buffalo meat instead of whale meat. As some misinformation about the subject is floating around online, I'll clarify that the Sega CD Snatcher cannot be uncensored, the European release includes the same censorship as the American, and that the extreme blood and gore present in CD Romantic is fully intact in the Sega CD Snatcher, with the sole exception that, in a certain scene, the animation is removed from the spilled viscera and limbs. Even the sleazy, money-grubbing informant Napoleon reveals himself as an endearing eccentric. Aside from the murderous snatchers and their master, the least appealing character, ironically, is Gillian himself, given the various menu options that suggest him to be a sexist creep, undermining some of his more positive characterization. As much as, in most moments, I like Gillian, and as much as I want to think Gillian is sincere during a video call with Jamie, and as frank as the rest of his surprisingly intimate dialogue with her seems to be, watching him comically betray her trust by lying about a cockroach so he has a chance of seeing her naked leaves me doubting our hero is as loving as he lets on. Perhaps Kojima copied a concerning disrespect for women from Blade Runner as well, though Gillian still treats women better than Deckard. Gillian's few, perhaps uncomfortable interactions with Mika, among other things, are remnants of the sleazier Snatcher of 1988.
Here comes Katrina.
I can't believe you did that, Gillian!
You see, I was just...
Face up to it like a man.
Probably the most uncomfortable part of Snatcher is that Katrina, the character the script treats as the sexiest babe, her beauty remarked on frequently, and the police computer for some reason containing intimate details about her body, whose perky nipples poke through her towel, even in the Sega CD version, is 14 years old! Yikes. The Sega CD version ages Katrina up to 18, covers her body when she's showering, and grants her a huskier voice. But the casual pedophilia is another sign of Snatcher's origins as a 1980s Japanese computer game. So remember, folks, that Hideo Kojima is definitely a pedophile. What are you gonna do, sue me, huh? You gonna sue me? You think I'm scared of you? Come on! Just try to... Actually, I don't think that's true. Kojima is not a pedophile. Rather, a large amount of anime and manga and adjacent video game culture sexualizes children in 1988 and today. Yep. For every woman, the original Snatcher invites the player to perform some combination of ogling her, hounding her for a date, and asking to grope her. This Gillian meets the grieving Katrina and can flash her his penis. He's more than willing to steal and sniff a 14-year-old girl's underwear. He seems to value Isabella over Jamie, who's supposed to be at the heart of the drama, because Isabella has a larger chest. The 1988 Snatcher feels less mature, written by the sort who could handle seeing a topless woman about as well as I could have at 13. This Snatcher resembles a porn OVA with the porn cut out. The Sega CD Gillian, then, is an improvement. Despite the removed nudity, the script feels more genuinely adult. However, I also wonder if sanitizing Gillian's objectification of literally every woman and child also risks leaving players with too favorable an impression of what Snatcher is. Each release of Snatcher differs from the others. Aside from censorship, the Sega CD Snatcher also features numerous graphical tweaks. Most clean up shortcomings in PC Romantic's artwork. In this moment, the CD Romantic Gillian appears to be a different character, unrecognizable. In the subsequent Japan-exclusive releases, the stiffer Isabella of CD Romantic is replaced with the sexier, more dynamic pose and more detailed dancing animation of the Sega CD Snatcher. The later Sega Saturn and PS1 remakes also add the final battles against insectors and snatchers in the Kremlin, present in the Sega CD Snatcher, but absent in CD Romantic. Also taking after the Sega CD version, these remakes add Mika and Katrina to their more robust endings. But the last burst of dialogue and gameplay that concludes the Sega CD release, and no other, remains locked away from Japanese language audiences. For those concerned with censorship, the Sega Saturn and PS1 releases also tone down the gore and remove most of it respectively. While the Saturn Snatcher also retains all nudity, these Japanese Snatcher releases are more censored than the Sega CD Snatcher. Even the Sega CD redesigns of the Snatchers improve on those of PC Romantic, scarier, more detailed, and sometimes better drawn. Compare these Snatchers from CD Romantic with their goofy jazz hands poses to these menacing Snatchers of the Sega CD release. In many ways, the English-language Snatcher is superior to CD Romantic. There may never have been a truly definitive Snatcher in any language. As is often the case with early narrative-driven video games, the adoration Snatcher receives in some quarters reflects less the video game's genuine heights, and more how rare serious, competent adult video games used to be, especially on English-language consoles in 1994. The quality presentation alone does much to elevate Snatcher's shoddier elements, even when the graphic designers sometimes let Gillian's face vary from baby to grizzled a bit too liberally. Despite the shortcomings in narrative and design, Snatcher proves engrossing, endearing, and delightful entertainment, although I admit I don't like it nearly as much now that I've played the MSX2 Snatcher, and the whole thing feels so much sleazier. Though set in the 2040s, Snatcher feels firmly of its time, firmly of a past generation of video games. For English-language audiences in 1994, though, more than well-presented fun, Snatcher would have been almost a revelation. A video game can do this?
Well, listen, you want me to tell you why I'm called Napoleon?
Snatcher is set near Christmas, by the way, so technically, it's a Christmas video game. Please set it alongside other holiday classics such as the eroge Kurayami and VA11 Hall A, whose Christmas setting perhaps alludes to Snatcher.
Gillian.
Merry Christmas!
Anyway, I always appreciate it if you give the video a thumbs up and you post a comment of some kind to show the algorithm that people are engaging with me. Also, you can subscribe to my channel if you want and follow me on Twitter at MackerelPhones, or subscribe to my second channel, Mackerel Undercover, while you're at it. Why not?